starting our recording.
How now, brown cow?
How now, brown cow? Unique.
New York.
Okay.
Tip of the tongue, teeth, and the lips. Okay, I am recording that.
We are as ready as we're going to be.
We are. We are ready for another Psyched for Psychology, I think. What do you think?
I want to agree with you that
Aw. You're so agreeable.
I am agreeable. I'm just trying to be nice, okay?
Okay, you say with an edge to your voice.
A little bit of an edge. Yeah, is there any benefit to being nice is really what we're talking about today. Do I want to be nice? And I think people have this, I don't know, we have this love-hate relationship with niceness, don't you think?
I think so. Well, especially because I think the Midwest, we get a bad reputation, or maybe a mixed reputation of like, oh, Minnesota nice, they're so nice, but then like passive aggressive, right?
Oh,
that's the stereotype. Nice. That's the yeah,
that wasn't very nice of you.
Oh boy. I can see how this one's gonna go. See, that's my passive aggressive side.
Oh yes, there's coming out sarcasm. Yes,
but no, being nice does, I think, have sort of a bad reputation because what are some of the sayings about niceness?
Well, nice guys always finish last.
Sure.
That's one I can think of.
Yes, exactly. Don't be too nice.
Don't be too nice, yes.
Right.
Why is he or why is she so nice to me all the time? There's this
like a suspicious
apprehension about it.
Yep.
Yeah, suspicious is good.
Right. Or I've even heard it said so-and-so is too nice.
Right.
Right? Where it's like there's got to be something going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. So we have this sense of vulnerability to being the recipient of niceness. We don't know how to take it. We don't know if we can trust. We just talked about trust, a couple of podcasts about
we did.
That and and oxytocin.
Oxytocin,
how
yes.
that plays a big role.
Yes.
Also, I think being nice, there's vulnerability we sense being the recipient of niceness, and I think there's a sense of vulnerability of being too nice because nice people always finish last. You got to look out for yourself.
Exactly.
Right?
Don't get taken for a ride.
Well, yes, right.
Right. Don't let people take advantage of you.
So what we want to really highlight is some of the research we have recently found, and that is from Psychology Today, wrote an article about psychology of niceness.
Yep.
We really want to highlight that being nice is kind of nice.
It is nice. And I think one of the ways in the psychology field that we understand niceness is based on a personality inventory called the Big Five, which has divided the personality into 5 major categories, one of them being agreeableness. And I think that's what this article on Psychology Today was basically referring to about what does it mean to be nice. So it means to score high on the agreeableness scale. So,
yes.
And actually, I remembered that I took this personality test. It's understandmyself.com. You can pay $10 to get your
score.
Get your score. It's several questions, but it was fairly easy to do. And then it spits out a report, which is very interesting, and it kind of tells you about your scores. So I don't want to brag, but I scored very high in agreeableness.
I can totally see that.
I was in the 90th percentile. So it has to do with compassion and politeness. So this agreeableness does.
All right. To be agreeable means you're going to have a sense of compassion. Mm-hmm. So with that might come some empathy, some attention to how other people are feeling.
Yep.
And then there's also, what did you say, politeness.
Yeah, it has to do with, so when I'm kind of just glancing at my report that I got, it says people high in agreeableness are nice. It literally says that. Compliant, nurturing, kind, naively trusting. So here's the
there
downside.
It is. There's the vulnerability, right?
And conciliatory.
Yeah, my wife has told me you're too trusting of people. And I'm like, I know, I just don't know how to turn that off.
Right. Yep. And here's the next part where it can be a downfall is, however, because of their tendency to avoid conflict, they often dissemble and hide what they think.
So there's that passive aggressiveness that can come out with us nice people.
Yep.
And that's why we can't trust them. Mm-hmm. So why be nice? I mean, the author of this was Noam Schpancer. I hope I'm pronouncing
That's
that.
fancy.
Schpancer. And
good job.
Noam is professor of psychology at Otterbein College and a clinical psychologist. So
Cool.
he's the one that wrote this article in Psychology Today, and I think it's really relevant because of this trepidation we have with being nice, both extending niceness to others, being the recipient of it as well. And so you're a very nice person. The research shows, if you will. And my experience is you're very nice.
Aw.
But have you been taken for a ride by
Well,
people?
I was just thinking about that because I think before I started doing my own kind of work, like going to therapy and kind of understanding myself better, I think I did. I think I was more of like what we would call a pushover, where I would, to my own detriment, be compliant, be agreeable.
Okay.
So once I started learning about boundaries, that's when I started to be able to harness this trait for the good versus feeling like, because I would get burned out, I would get like resentful and tired all the time, because I was just trying to help everybody. This is even before I was a therapist, by the way. And I just was like, felt like it was my mission in life to just help all the time. And it was too much.
Yes.
So.
And that's the word right there. Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Exactly.
Yes. And I can do that too. People ask me for something and I'm already saying yes before I've even heard what they're asking.
I know, me too.
And that is a boundary issue and that I've had to work on too.
Yep.
And that from me, that I've had to work on really is emanated from just people pleasing and something I'm still actively working on. What's interesting, I see for myself, and I've seen a lot with clients, that when we're thinking about these big five that you were talking about: extroversion, openness to experience, neuroticism, conscientiousness, and agreeableness. When we score very high on that, the downside is that we don't have as good boundaries to protect ourselves. So when we're moving away from niceness, because we're too nice, we're actually moving from being passive or being passive aggressive to being aggressive. And that's the trouble, is like we go from one extent to the other. And then people kind of get this whiplash, like, wow, why are you such a jerk all the time? Well, I'm tired of getting taken advantage of.
That's what can happen, right?
Yeah.
It's like a whiplash effect.
So this is what I do at airports.
Okay.
Because I'm tired of being the one who always moves.
Oh, good
And when you're
call.
walking down the corridor, it's fun little kind of psychological experiment to just watch people's behavior.
There you go.
And I noticed, because I was like trying to get steps in while I'm waiting for flights and things. And I noticed I'm always accommodating for everybody else that's walking. And I thought, that's such a metaphor for my life. Why am I the one that's so agreeable to move for everybody else and accommodate? And I'm just trying to be nice. And then I thought, well, wait a second. I'm not moving anymore. Everybody else is going to move for me. And it was just kind of this fun little experiment I did. And I'm just thinking, all right, I'm going to walk. I'm not moving.
Okay.
And I'm going to walk straight, and everyone's going to have to move for me. And I swear, if I didn't swerve last minute, people would have ran right into me. But
wow.
It was just a fun little experiment how I was, in a playful way, moving from passive to aggressive. And it's hard to find that balance when we're moving from niceness where it can be a liability to us.
Yep.
And we think we have to move away from niceness as if it's an all or nothing proposition. I'm either nice or I'm not nice.
Yep. Well, I think a little bit ago you brought up people pleasing, and I found myself wondering, what's the difference between being highly agreeable and being a people pleaser, right? Like,
That's a great question.
so when I was like, okay, how would I explain that, my experience of it? Because I think I call myself a people pleaser in recovery.
Right. Me
Right,
too.
where it's like I finally learned about, setting limits and saying no and everything, which is still difficult to do. But I think for me, being highly agreeable is I give my boundaries in a very kind way. I think when I'm telling someone no or setting a limit, I'm still highly aware at all times of the relationship. So maybe that's for me kind of how it translates, is how does a highly agreeable person set boundaries, right? Or how does a highly agreeable person say no? I think it's very, very kindly.
Very kindly.
Yeah.
Which it seems like an oxymoron
Yep.
for people. So I was an adjunct professor, and I taught practical theology for a while. It was really fun. And I was working with people who are going to be missionaries.
Okay.
And I said, all right, so here's your homework assignment. In the next week, someone's going to ask you to do something you do not want to do. And if you don't want to do it, I just want you to say no and nothing else.
Just the word no.
Just no. And they responded and they said, that is so mean. I said, what's mean about that?
Yeah, right.
Well, and it just is. And they really
That's
said,
interesting.
If I give my reason, then it's not as mean. Like, well, no, because this. And I said, when you give your reason, you give other people the power to determine if your reason is reasonable.
Enough. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So I would say, don't give your reason, because when you give your reason for your no, you give the other person power to determine if your reason is reasonable. And they still hated the whole concept. So it was so funny. They would come back.
Fascinating.
And if somebody said no without a reason, they got an A. If they said no with a reason, they got a B. And so we had somebody, she came back and I said, how did it go? And she said, well, my friend said, asked if I wanted to go dancing. And I said, did you want to go? She said, no. I said, what did you tell her? Well, I told her I had homework. And then so she came back a couple hours later, said, hey, do you want to go dancing? And the gal said, well, my parents are going to be calling. And so the friend said, oh, okay. Then the friend came back later.
Yeah.
And, hey, do you want to go dancing? I've got some stuff in the laundry I'm waiting for. And then the person came back like 11 o'clock. Hey, you ready? Can we go dancing?
Yep.
And I said, what did you do? She said, well, I went. And I was so upset with her. I said, why were you upset with her? And she just paused. And then she said, I guess I really should have been mad at myself.
There you go.
Because I wasn't really. But that's what happens.
That
for
is
those
what
of us that can be highly agreeable.
Yes.
We can become highly agitated.
Yes.
Because it's really an avoidance of responsibility to take care of, and like you're saying, have that boundary for ourselves.
Yep, exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that because I can relate to that a lot. Like, I think actually now I wish I could go back in time with your class where they had to say no. I almost wonder if the people who were highest in agreeableness had the hardest time with that exercise, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm speculating, but I think again, it's this desire to kind of have others around you be at ease, be okay with you, be okay with life, right? And I think so. Then I wonder. People might say, well, highly agreeable people can't get ahead. Like, is a highly agreeable person going to be the CEO of a company? And I'm curious about that too, right? Like,
that is interesting.
Because can you be agreeable and still advance in your like career or in your life? You know, I would argue I would think some people would argue no, but I think it all depends on your approach, right?
And I think it depends on, like we were alluding to earlier, you and I are both very highly agreeable people, and we've had to work on it. We are very aware of our blind spots.
True.
And so I think, and I know, people can be CEOs, very effective, be very agreeable, and have some balance. And here's what happens, I think, when we are highly agreeable, we are so because we become very attuned to how everybody's feeling. We are sort of hyper vigilant over our environment. And so I don't know about you. I can walk into any room and I can tell you how that person feels, how the other person feels. Clients will come in. I'll walk them from the waiting room into my office and I'll say, hey, how's it going? How you doing? And they'll tell me, and I already knew because I can pick it out as soon as I see them in the waiting room. So people that are highly agreeable are highly attuned to everybody and everything around them except for one thing. Themselves. Right.
Yes.
So I know everybody's feeling except for myself. Whereas I think a good and effective leader in an organization can have that hypervigilance and awareness and attunement with everybody and everything around them. And they've learned to actually become much more tuned to how they're feeling and what their needs are. And conversely,
Yep.
the other side of that coin, hopefully you have people that aren't as agreeable, we know can also arise to those kind of positions.
Yep.
And I don't think that's our case at all here at Nystrom, thank God.
Right.
But we know people who kind of run roughshod over people in leadership positions.
Yep.
And they know a lot of how they're feeling, but
Yep.
they are really unaware of how others are feeling.
Right.
And so they have to really hone in and develop that.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
balance.
I came across something interesting here is because then I was thinking, okay, what does a disagreeable person
Ooh, yes.
look like? And or what does a person lower in agreeableness look like? So the primary difference between criminals and non-criminals is disagreeableness. Whoa. If the typical criminal is more disagreeable than 98% of people in the general population, then they're talking about the difference between men and women in agreeableness.
Ooh.
So women tend to be more agreeable, according to this.
Wow, that would be an interesting study to go deeper on.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, but what was I going to say?
Well, I think I think that points to how we are socialized. Is that inherently something about women that women are just more agreeable, or is it
Socializing.
something conditioned by our culture?
Sure.
And I think, given my DBT background,
Yeah.
we tend to think things are more biosocial. So, and we might be asking of ourselves, why am I so agreeable? And it's likely an aspect of genetics and our environment and our nurture.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
my guess is that with people, male or female, or people just in their own temperament within their own home,
Yep.
where does this agreeableness come from? It likely comes from a sense of our genetics
Yeah.
and our home environment.
Actually, I was just thinking about my parents. My parents are both pretty agreeable too. Probably my mom a little more so, but in general, I think both highly agreeable. What about you?
That's a really good question. My mom definitely very agreeable. I think my dad very much agreeable as well. And yet we can be born that way, but we might be born. We say this in our DBT work and the population we serve.
Yep.
And I think we can generalize this too to everybody, that you can grow up in a very emotionally sensitive environment. Well, you can grow up a very emotionally sensitive person, but your environment is highly traumatic or invalidating.
Yeah.
And then you actually have a greater sense of, I would say in this sense, disagreeableness.
Yeah.
Because you're living more under self-invalidation and then invalidation towards other people.
Sure. Yep.
So I don't know if it goes the other way around. I think it takes therapy to really be able to change that again and sort of get back to, okay, yeah, this is who I am, and I can find healing from the trauma I've experienced,
Right.
from the invalidation I've endured growing up, and there really is freedom, and we can find balance so that we can be agreeable and not vulnerable. I can be an agreeable person and not vulnerable to people taking advantage of me because I know what my blind spots are too.
True. That's a great point.
And I can go from being disagreeable to becoming agreeable by working through some of the things I've learned growing up.
I was just going to say, what if I'm someone listening to this who I'm worried I'm too agreeable? What are some things I can do? I was going to say assertiveness training or assertiveness skills.
So what is assertiveness? Because that's a good word.
Yeah.
And I'm with you.
And it's kind of an antidote, right? So
Right.
assertiveness, my understanding, is the ability to communicate wants and needs, my own wants and needs, in a way that is neither passive nor aggressive. So kind of like the golden mean, the middle, right?
Right.
Of I'm telling you in a very kind way, or at least a very appropriate way,
Right.
where I'm at. What do I want? So it's a lot of I statements. I need, I want, I feel. And it's the ability to not, I think, kind of beat around the bush. Like, well, maybe we could kind of sort of like, If you want to, we could maybe try.
It's straightforward.
It's very straightforward.
Who wants that last piece of pie? I do.
Yes, exactly.
I would like it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or the ability to say to someone that you work with, I need you to do this differently, right? Or
Yes.
I need us to work on this, right? Instead of just
Being
avoiding.
very clear.
Clear, yes.
And concise. I think of assertiveness versus passiveness, aggressiveness, passive aggressiveness as it relates to control.
Yeah.
So aggressive people is, if I'm aggressive, I'm trying to control you.
Yes.
If I'm passive, I'm allowing you to control me. If I'm assertive, I'm controlling me. Namely, I'm taking control of what my thoughts, my needs, my desires are. But if I have no clue what they are,
Yep.
it's going to be really difficult to be assertive.
Yep.
Really difficult to be agreeable and not vulnerable.
Yep. Exactly. So, assertiveness, that's another one. If you are worried you're too agreeable, I'm just thinking a highly agreeable person would worry about that, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a really good point.
if you're worried you're too agreeable, you might be agreeable.
If you're not worried at all, well,
if you're not worried at all. Which again, I think it depends on how all of your other traits go together too.
Yes.
So if you're high in neuroticism and you're also high in agreeableness, that's where you might be sort of a compulsive people pleaser, right? Because I think neuroticism has to do with how extreme do your traits go. So anyway, maybe we can dig into neuroticism on another podcast.
Well, I think you're right. I just would comment on that is maybe it's the neuroticism, which is kind of an old word or old term.
Yep.
But I think the idea is if I need you, if I need your approval, I think of A words. I talk about this with my clients, needing people's A words, where I need their acceptance, I need their approval, I need their affection, etc. And now I'm working to get that. And now it's a toxic kind of relationship.
Well, and I will just really briefly clarify. So neuroticism is negative sensitivity to negative emotions. So I just wanted to clarify that because that word I think is a little loaded, right? You're so neurotic, right? Like that saying. But it's basically general sensitivity to negative emotions such as pain, sadness, irritable or anger. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think that when we are so sensitive to other people, that's what we were talking about before. I'm so attuned to that.
Yes.
And I'm living now to fix that and manage that in other people.
Right.
Meanwhile, I'm completely oblivious to that in myself, which is it's a boundary thing because I'm being responsible for things that aren't my responsibility, namely how other people think, feel, react. And I'm negligent of being responsible for myself.
Right. Exactly.
And that can come across as very agreeable to other people when we're doing that. I call it over-functioning.
Oh,
and
cool.
so, when we're over-functioning, I'm taking responsibility now for how other people think, feel, react, what they're going to say, what they might do. And I'm really managing that, and I've lost my sense of self. Yes, because my self is so enmeshed with this other person, right? And that's where someone will come across as very agreeable, and then they can go to being very aggressive because they're stuffing and suppressing how they really feel about something. Usually because they don't know, but then they know that I'm getting bitter, I'm getting resentful, I'm getting angry. Boom, it comes out explosive and reactive to this person. Meanwhile, the other person's like, what just happened here?
Right.
So I'm glad you pointed that out just to expand on. Like that's where being agreeable can be put us in a real vulnerable position.
I agree, especially, and now I'm thinking too, just in terms of addiction. I promise I won't go off on too much of a tangent, but remember the podcast we did with Rasha where we were talking about resentment and addiction. And so suppressing all your resentments and then you feel justified in your addictive behavior.
Right.
So I can see how highly agreeable people, I almost wonder are they more inclined towards an addiction if they haven't learned how to be assertive or if they haven't learned how to be in touch with what they want. Because if you're agreeable most of the time to your own detriment, think about all that resentment, right?
Right.
So and so I just know that resentment breeds like I need an outlet. I need some sort of way to feel better, right?
Well,
so,
and if you think about that, that really can be a form of passive aggressiveness.
right, exactly.
I'm going to self-medicate
Yeah, great
this
point.
so that I don't, because I don't know how. I haven't been given the skills or whatever
Exactly.
to deal with this straight up.
But
so agreeableness, I would think,
Yeah.
can really result in addictive behaviors. Not always.
No, but you're right, and I hadn't really thought of addiction that way. But you're right. Addiction is kind of a passive aggressive behavior because you're passive when it comes to saying or knowing what you want, but then the behaviors that you do have a lot of bad consequences. It's like now you have to deal with all that.
Right. I'm kind of doing end around to try to find how my needs are going to be met.
Right. But look at all the consequences.
Right. Well, and then when we grow up in a home where we are having to suppress how we really feel because it is very invalidating.
Yep.
Now okay, what do? I'm suppressing this.
Right.
And I have no idea what it is, but somehow I know I have pain or this feels good. And so I'm going to keep doing this chemical or something behavioral to feel better.
Yep, exactly.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Now, agreeableness is not all bad, right? We've been sort of highlighting where being agreeable and being nice can lead to being vulnerable. And yet this study, ironically, highlighted that being nice and agreeable is very, very attractive, very appealing, and helpful.
Yes.
So what they found is that agreeableness translate actually into 8 different kind of themes.
Oh, cool.
And so one is self-transcendence. So they would say agreeable people aspire to grow.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it's funny. We both like that. We agree with that. And so they're motivated to show care and concern for others. There's that compassion piece you were talking about either. So there's this self-transcendence. Agreeable people have greater contentment. Now, we live in a culture that breeds discontent. Marketing is really, if you think about it, designed to make us feel discontent because I don't have this
A, B, or C product.
Right. So agreeable people are very content, meaning that they can accept life as it is. They're able to adapt to novel situations and tend to experience satisfaction across life domains. Now, who wouldn't want that contentment? 3 is that they have a theme of relational investment. So they are people who are motivated to cultivate positive relationships with others and build systems of mutual support. Number 4, team working. Agreeable people use empathy to coordinate goals with others. Now, wouldn't that be interesting to see on an interview if somebody is agreeable? Because notice that there's relational investment, there's teamwork, there's contentment, there's self-transcendence about growth. I would think, I want to hire people like this, right?
Right, me too.
So real quick, a few more themes here. Agreeable people tend to have work investment. So they adjust well to their work environment, and they put a lot of work and effort in. Lower results emphasis. I really like this. In other words, that there are people who place a lower emphasis on setting individual goals and producing individual results. Why? Because they're team oriented. And the last 2 is that they have what's called social norm orientation. So agreeable people are compliant with social norms and rules and tend to avoid rule breaking and wrongdoing. And then lastly, social integration. Agreeable people integrate well into social roles and institutions and are less likely to engage in delinquency and antisocial behavior. So these are some of the real advantages of being agreeable. These are the kind of people you not only want to work for you, but these are the kind of people you want to work with.
Exactly.
So just a little plug here. You and I here at Nystrom happen to be very agreeable.
Wouldn't it? Right. I think, I want to know about people's experiences with like managers, who think of, because we all know someone who's agreeable. I would encourage people to think back on your job history. Like, who are your favorite managers? Were they agreeable? Just
Right.
curious.
Well, no, we can think about that. Were they agreeable? Were my parents, like you asked me, were they agreeable?
Right.
Siblings, were they agreeable or
Yep.
not? Just to sort of take an inventory and be able to say to ourselves, oh, yeah, well, it makes sense if I'm not as agreeable as I wish I were.
Right.
What's interesting is what this author said at the end, his kind of conclusion was that when we are agreeable, it can best be viewed as a capacity for love, which was an interesting conclusion. And this writer went on to say, while it makes us vulnerable in certain ways, its impact on both individuals and society is profoundly positive. Nice people may not win the game, but they enjoy playing it more. And they make the game more fun for others. So nice guys, nice gals don't always finish last.
Right.
They're having fun. They're enjoying life. They're more content, and they have a positive effect with people around them.
Yes. Well, I think that is a good note to wrap up on. And I really want us to maybe look at delving into the other big 5 traits, because there's some really interesting ones out there. But for now, all you agreeable people out there, keep doing you. Just make sure you know how to be assertive.
Right. And for those of us that may not, go see somebody, talk about that. Therapy can be super helpful to work through some of those things. And it is nice to be nice.
It is nice to be nice.
Yeah, hopefully we've been able to plug that a little bit more.
Yes. Take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.